visit to Kenya this time together with my deputy, who happens to be an East African citizen, was a trade facilitation visit. And I'm going to have another of these in Rwanda tomorrow and the day after tomorrow before I move to Addis Ababa for the 50th anniversary of the African Union. I'm doing this visit on trade facilitation simultaneously with a week of negotiation on a big worldwide WTO trade facilitation agreement in Geneva. On the one side, people are in Geneva negotiating a new WTO multilateral agreement which would simplify, harmonize, streamline customs operation in order to facilitate trade. And on the other hand, people here, notably under the auspices of Trademark Eastern Africa, are working on the ground to address bottlenecks on infrastructures, on standards, on customs procedures. And it's a symbol that while people are negotiating in Geneva, I'm here on the ground looking at how things are happening in reality. And that's one of the big lessons, and I've learned a lot during these 2 days, whether with the Kenyan Bureau of Standards, with the Eastern African Shipping Council, with the Eastern African Business Council, with the partners of Trademark Eastern Africa, with whom we discussed today. It's just a confirmation that you need to cook the omelette on both sides. You need the sort of Geneva, rules-based, big treaty organization that installs rules and disciplines that are valid for everybody, but on the other side, you also need things to be monitored, streamlined on the ground, and unless you cook the omelette by both sides, things do not happen, and at the end of the day, what matters is not, trade for trade. What matters is that trade works for development, for poverty reduction, and I think this region is a good example. And I think, although I have to remain neutral, my knowledge of how these ground-based trade facilitation initiatives work tell me that the Eastern African community is clearly ahead of the curve in facilitating trade, whether compared to other African regions or even compared to other regional integration processes in other continents. I mean, not that things are yet fine. There's still a huge amount of work to do. When you look at the cost of moving a container from Mombasa to Kigali or from Dar es Salaam to DRC, and you measure the relative cost of transport moving through borders, there still is a huge amount of efficiencies to gain, which would directly benefit to the development of this region. But I think what I have seen, what I have heard, tells me that it's taking good shape. There is political momentum, there is technical engagement, there is business, civil society, government, special organizations like Trademark Eastern Africa working together. So I'm believing Kenya for Rwanda this afternoon with a sort of one conviction, which is that things are on a track of improvement, which I think is overall good news. Frank?
Okay. Shall I move these? Yep, I must say from our side at Trademark East Africa, we're humbled to have the Director General, Pascal Lamy, here with us. And I think for me, it's a great symbol of the WTO's commitment to aid for trade and trade facilitation that he's here in this very important week, looking at some of the aid for trade interventions that we at Trademark East Africa really try to make happen across East Africa. And we had a fantastic Partners Forum with about 30 partners from all over East Africa this morning that I thought showed a lot of the diversity of the work we do around trade facilitation, infrastructure, and also streamlining processes. And I can't agree more, Director General, that the big challenge for us in East Africa is reducing the high costs of doing business across borders. And this, I think you said this morning, it's around about the 10% of the value of trade due to very high costs of doing business across borders. And we at Trademark East Africa are very committed to bringing down those costs by 15% and increasing trade. So a lot of the work that we do across the East African community, we've also just started work in South Sudan, is really dedicated to being a results-driven initiative to find results for East Africans so that the tangible benefits of trade in terms of increased prosperity and reduced poverty really happen. So for me, it's been a real delight. We're going to be doing our best, DG, to deliver the results on the ground here, and we estimate those results are worth around $17 billion for the private sector in East Africa in terms of reduced costs. That means more trade, increased competitiveness, and lower levels of poverty here in East Africa. Thank you.
Good. Any question on your side? Yeah. Yeah, so there and then. Yeah.
Probably as WTO, which are some areas that you feel Africa, Kenya in particular, really needs to focus in terms of channeling investment, in terms of funding various issues surrounding the whole aspect of infrastructure?
No, look, if you compare Africa to other continents on this planet, trade-wise, Africa has one specificity, which is the low rate of Africa trading with Africa. That's an oddity, can be explained by historical reasons. So we are fully supportive of this African Union boosting intra-African trade initiative, which is a vast program which was agreed 2 years ago at AU level. And the road to getting there has to do with a multiple of obstacle bottlenecks, which the variety of the programs of Trademark Eastern Africa evidences, starting, of course, with infrastructures, which we know are not yet up to the trade potential and the economic development potential of this region. Starting with border administration, starting with harmonization or mutual recognition of technical standards. So all these issues have to be addressed in a way together. It's fine to improve the operations of the port of Dar es Salaam or Mombasa, but if the upstream road transport is clogged, it won't have an impact on trade. And it's great to do both the port and the upstream road link, but if there is a discrepancy in standards that cannot move once you have the road connection from one country to another because the standards are different, then you bump. So these issues have to be sort of addressed one by one. It's complex. It's perfectly doable, provided you have the necessary political energy to do it. Yeah. Go ahead.
My name is Harry Kuriana from the Spanish News Agency. You just mentioned the huge cost of moving a container from Mombasa to Kigali. How does corruption affect trade in the region?
No, it has. When you look at the numbers, it has an impact, which is that if you are a Rwandan consumer, you have to pay 30-40% more than if trade was flowing as it does in Europe, US, or Japan. And that's, in terms of the tax on the consumer and the sort of purchasing power potential which is there, it's incredibly big as compared to other economic and development challenges. But it just happened that, Rwanda is a landlocked country which is totally dependent on the availability of this land. So reducing the cost of trade by 30% is increasing the Rwandan citizen or the Ugandan or the Burundis or even the Tanzanian and Zambians purchasing power by 30%. Now, you can do that through a big macroeconomic endeavor. You can also do that in addressing these things one by one. Yeah.
You've previously spoken that the governments have reached for protectionist policies because they worry that they can't get growth through any other means, and you've warned against that. Are you seeing that problem sort of growing sort of more broadly in the world? Do you still see that as a problem, people reaching for protectionist policies to try and stimulate growth?
Now, what remains a problem is protectionist pulsions. And they will be there as long as, there'll be more than 200 million unemployed people on this planet as a consequence of this crisis. So the temptation is there, and that's a problem. So far, they have been, let's say, reasonably well resisted by governments. We regularly report, notably to the G20, the result, our radar picture. Nothing dramatic at this stage, a bit of slippage here and there, but for a variety of reasons, among which the existence of WTO disciplines and monitoring and surveillance, among which, it's not the only reason, so far, no dramatic protectionist reaction, and certainly nothing like what all of us had expected in 2008 as a consequence of previous economic episodes in history, and notably in the 1930s. Okay, one more question, and I think we have to
finish. We're running out of time.
Yeah, so one more, and that's it.
Probably this is the last question. This is imports. China is making a drive towards third-world countries for trade purposes. What is the stand or the opinion of WTO about this innovation in imports of Africa?
WTO is in the business of opening, facilitating trade for development and welfare. So we facilitate trade. But who trades with whom is not something we decide.